He was dying, and he didn't even know it yet. Marcus Cole had been riding through winter storms for 15 years, but this one was different. The sky had turned the color of old bruises, purple and black and swollen with something ancient and merciless. The wind didn't just blow, it screamed. It tore across the frozen plains like a living thing, hungry and cold and patient. He'd left the trading post 3 days earlier with enough supplies to last him through the mountain pass. Salt pork, dried, beans, ammunition and coffee, the essentials of a man who lived alone and preferred it that way. The pack horse carried blankets and flour, tools and rope, everything a solitary man needed to survive until spring loosened its grip on the high country. But winter doesn't care about your plans. The temperature had been dropping all morning, falling like a stone down a well. Marcus could feel it in his bones, in the way his breath crystallized instantly in the air, in the way his horse, a sturdy bay mare named Copper, began to labor with each step. The snow wasn't falling anymore. It was driving sideways, tiny, needles of ice that found every gap in his clothing, every exposed inch of skin. He should have turned back. Any reasonable man would have turned back, but Marcus Cole had never thought of himself as reasonable, only determined. The ranch on the other side of the pass was waiting. Old Tom Henderson had paid him good money to deliver those supplies, and Marcus didn't leave jobs unfinished. That's what he told himself anyway, that it was about honor and duty. The truth was simpler and sadder. He had nowhere else to go. By midday, the world had disappeared. There was no sky, no ground, no horizon, only white, an endless, swirling white that erased everything it touched. Marcus couldn't see Copper's head anymore, couldn't see his own hands gripping the reins. He rode blind, trusting the horse to find her footing, praying she could sense the trail beneath 3 feet of fresh snow. That's when he felt it, a tremor running through Copper's body. She stumbled, caught herself, stumbled again. Her breathing had changed, coming in great heaving gasps that steamed in the frozen air. Panic flickered in Marcus's chest, cold and sharp. "Easy, girl," he murmured, his voice stolen by the wind the moment it left his lips. "Just a little further." But there was no further. Copper's front legs buckled, and Marcus barely had time to throw himself clear before she went down. He landed hard in the snow, the impact driving the air from his lungs. When he scrambled back to her, she was lying on her side, flanks heaving, eyes rolling white with exhaustion and fear. He knew. God help him, he knew. The cold had taken her just like it would take him if he didn't find shelter. But knowing didn't make it easier when 10 minutes later her breathing slowed and stopped. The storm swallowed her last exhale like it had never happened. Marcus stood there in the screaming wind, one hand on Copper's cooling neck, and felt something break inside him. Not his spirit, not yet, but his certainty. That iron confidence that had carried him through every hardship, every loss, every lonely night. It cracked like ice beneath a boot heel. The packhorse was gone. Spooked by Copper's collapse, it had bolted into the white wall of the storm, taking with it everything Marcus needed to survive. The blankets, the food, the rope, gone. He was alone in a white hell with nothing but the clothes on his back and a dead horse at his feet. Marcus forced himself to move. Standing still meant death. He knew that much. He stumbled forward, leaning into the wind, each step a monumental effort through snow that grabbed at his legs like grasping hands. His coat was already soaked through, the wool heavy with ice. His gloves were frozen stiff. He couldn't feel his feet anymore. The cold was different at 40 below. It wasn't just uncomfortable. It was malicious. It found its way through every layer, every barrier. And it took the warmth from your blood, the moisture from your lungs, the hope from your heart. It took and took and took until there was nothing left but a frozen shell that used to be a man. Marcus didn't know how long he walked. Time lost meaning in the white chaos. It could have been minutes or hours. His thoughts began to scatter, drifting away like snowflakes. He thought about his mother, dead 20 years now. He thought about the girl he'd loved when he was 17, the one who'd married his brother instead. He thought about old Tom Henderson, waiting for supplies that would never arrive. He thought about how stupid he'd been, how arrogant. His legs gave out. One moment he was walking, the next he was face down in the snow, and he didn't have the strength to get back up. The cold was inside him now, in his chest, in his belly, in his bones. It felt almost peaceful. The wind didn't sound so angry anymore. The snow felt soft, like a blanket. He closed his eyes, and that's when he heard them, voices cutting through the storm, female voices, sharp and urgent, hands on his shoulders, rolling him over. Faces above him, dark eyes filled with something that looked like determination. Marcus Cole had been dying, but 3 women had found him in the white wilderness, and they were about to do something that would challenge everything he thought he knew about survival, about trust, about the very nature of warmth itself. They were stripping him, and he couldn't understand why. Marcus's mind was a fog, thick and cold and slow. He could barely process what was happening. 3 women, Apache, he realized through his confusion, were kneeling around him in the snow. Their hands moved with purpose, quick and efficient, peeling away his frozen coat, his ice-stiffened shirt, his soaked pants. He tried to protest. The word "no" formed in his mind, but never made it to his lips. His jaw wouldn't work properly. His tongue felt thick and clumsy. All he could do was lie there, shivering so violently his teeth rattled, while these strangers undressed him in the middle of the worst storm he'd ever seen. It went against everything, every survival rule he'd ever learned. Every instinct screaming in his frost-addled brain told him this was wrong. You didn't take off your clothes in a blizzard. You didn't expose bare skin to air that could freeze flesh in minutes. You kept every layer you had, no matter how wet, no matter how cold. But they weren't listening to his instincts. They were listening to something older. One of the women, the eldest, with silver threading through her black hair and lines of hard-won wisdom etched around her eyes, spoke to the others in their language. Her voice was calm, measured, certain. The other 2 responded with nods, their movements practiced and synchronized like a dance they'd performed 100 times before. Within minutes, Marcus was completely naked, exposed to the killing cold. The wind bit into his skin like wolves' teeth. He should have been terrified, but the shivering had stopped. That was bad. He knew enough to know that when you stopped shivering, you were in serious trouble. The body was giving up, shutting down, preparing to die. The elder woman said something, and one of the others, a younger woman with fierce dark eyes and quick hands, began unwrapping bundles from a travois Marcus hadn't noticed before. Furs. Thick, luxurious furs that looked dry and warm and impossibly precious out here in this frozen wasteland. But before they wrapped him, the 3rd woman, barely more than a girl really, with a long braid that hung down her back, did something strange. She took handfuls of dry snow and began rubbing it briskly over Marcus's skin. His arms, his chest, his legs. It should have hurt. It should have made everything worse. Instead, it helped. The friction generated tiny amounts of heat, and more importantly, it cleared away the dangerous moisture clinging to his skin. The wet layer that had been stealing his body heat with every passing second. That's when Marcus understood. The wet clothes weren't protecting him, they were killing him. Woolen cotton, soaked through with melted snow and sweat, conducted heat away from his body 30 times faster than bare skin in the air. Every second he'd spent in those frozen garments, he'd been wrapping himself tighter in his own death. These women had known. Without thermometers or textbooks, without scientific instruments or formal education, they had known, and they'd acted with a confidence born from generations of survival in this unforgiving land. The elder woman met his eyes as they began wrapping him in the furs. She said something in her language, her voice gentle but firm. Marcus didn't understand the words, but he understood the meaning. She was telling him to trust, to let go of his fear and his pride and his assumptions about how the world worked. She was asking him to have faith. They layered the furs carefully, methodically. First a soft rabbit pelt against his bare skin, then heavier deer hides thick with winter coats. Finally, a massive buffalo robe that could have covered 3 men. Each layer trapped air, creating pockets of insulation that would hold whatever body heat he had left. But that wasn't all. The eldest woman nodded to the others, and they began dragging him, still wrapped in his cocoon of furs, across the snow. Marcus wanted to ask where they were taking him, but his voice still wouldn't work. He could only watch the white sky scroll past above him, feeling like a child being carried to bed. A shelter. They'd built a shelter. It was small, barely large enough for 4 people, constructed from packed snow blocks and covered with more hides. The entrance was low, forcing them to crawl, but once inside, Marcus felt the difference immediately. No wind. The howling, tearing, relentless wind was gone, muffled to a distant whisper. The temperature was still below freezing, but without the wind's constant assault, it felt almost manageable. They arranged him carefully on a bed of pine boughs, covered with more furs. The youngest woman tucked the edges tightly around him, sealing out any drafts. The elder woman produced a small bundle wrapped in cloth and unwrapped it to reveal something unexpected. Warm stones. They'd been heating them somehow, keeping them wrapped in their own clothes, and now they placed them strategically around Marcus's body, not touching his skin directly, on that would cause burns, but close enough that he could feel their blessed heat. There was no fire. That's what shocked Marcus most, when his mind cleared enough to notice. No fire in the shelter, no smoke, no flickering flames. Just the carefully conserved heat from those stones, and from their own bodies as the women settled around him. The elder woman saw his confusion. She placed a hand flat against the shelter's snow wall and spoke again in her language. The youngest woman, the one with the braid, surprised him by responding in halting English. "Fire! It fills air with death smoke," she said, each word carefully chosen. "In small space like this, fire steals breath. We use body warmth. Earth warmth is enough. Enough. Such a simple word for such profound wisdom. They weren't fighting the winter with fire and fury. They were working with it, using its own materials, snow, ice, stone, to create sanctuary. The snow walls insulated them. The packed ice blocked the wind. Their combined body heat, carefully trapped and conserved, created a microclimate that could sustain life. Marcus felt warmth beginning to return to his extremities. Not comfortable warmth. His fingers and toes burned and ached as blood flow resumed, but life, the deadly cold, was retreating from his core. He'd been so certain he knew how to survive. 15 years in this territory, 15 years of winter camps and long rides and harsh conditions. He'd thought his experience made him wise, but these women, they knew things he'd never even imagined. The elder woman was watching him with those dark, knowing eyes. She said something that sounded almost like a question. The girl with the braid translated, "Mother of 3 bears asks, 'Do you understand now why we took the death clothes away?'" Marcus managed a tiny nod. Yes, God, yes, he understood. They'd saved his life by doing the thing that seemed most dangerous, most counterintuitive. They'd stripped away his assumptions along with his clothes. Most people, the girl continued, translating the elder woman's words, they do not know how to walk in winter. They fight. They struggle. They make enemies of cold and snow. She paused, searching for words. But winter is not enemy. Winter just is, like mountain, like river. You cannot fight river. You must understand river. Move with river. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the warmth slowly spreading through his body, feeling his heartbeat growing stronger and more regular. These women had found him in the storm, had read the signs of his dying, and had responded with knowledge passed down through generations. Not written in books, not taught in schools, but lived, practiced, remembered. He'd almost died because he didn't know what they knew. Because his people had forgotten or never learned how to truly listen to the land. Outside, the storm continued to rage. But inside this small shelter, built from snow and wisdom and generations of hard-won survival skills, there was warmth, there was safety, and for the first time in his adult life, Marcus Cole felt something he'd almost forgotten, gratitude that reached down to his very bones. As feeling returned to his body, Marcus began to truly see the women who had saved him. Mother of 3 bears. That's what the girl had called the eldest, was perhaps 50 winters old. Though hardship and weather had carved lines into her face that might have belonged to someone older, her hands were strong and scarred, the hands of someone who'd worked for every breath, every meal, every moment of survival. But her eyes held something gentle beneath their practical assessment, something that spoke of children raised, of wisdom earned, of losses endured and overcome. The younger woman, the one with the fierce, dark eyes, never stopped moving. She checked the shelter's walls, adjusted the furs around Marcus, monitored the placement of the warming stones with a hawk's vigilance. There was an intensity to her, a coiled readiness, as if she expected danger at any moment and was prepared to meet it head-on. And the girl with the braid. She couldn't have been more than 16, 17 at most. Young enough that some softness still clung to her features, not yet worn away by the brutal mathematics of survival. But her hands were sure when she worked, and her eyes, they held a curiosity that hadn't been beaten out of her by the world. It was this youngest one who seemed appointed as translator, though her English came in fits and starts, pieces gathered from trading posts and missionary schools, and who knew what other encounters with Marcus's people. "I am called Sky Dancer," she said, pointing to herself. Then to the intense woman, "She is Red Willow. And this," she gestured with obvious reverence to the elder, "is Mother of 3 bears. She is teacher, keeper of old ways." Marcus tried to speak. His voice came out as a croak, rough as gravel. "Thank you." 2 small words that couldn't begin to encompass what he felt, but they were all he had. Sky Dancer translated, and Mother of 3 bears nodded. She said something lengthy in response, her hands moving as she spoke, painting pictures in the air. She says... Sky Dancer paused, working through the translation. She says the land provides for those who listen. Today, land spoke through us. We were tracking, following the elk herd. They move before big storms. They know, always, the elk know. She frowned, concentrating. We saw tracks, horse tracks. Wrong direction, wrong time. We knew. Someone was in danger. They'd tracked him. Through that white hell. Through conditions where Marcus couldn't even see his own hands. These women had followed his trail and found him before the storm erased him completely. Red Willow spoke suddenly, her voice sharp and urgent. Sky Dancer's expression grew troubled as she translated. Red Willow says, she sees death signs fading from you. The black color in lips, the stillness in hands, but... She hesitated. Recovery will hurt. When warmth returns to frozen flesh. It burns. She wasn't wrong. Marcus's fingers and toes felt like they were being stabbed with thousands of tiny knives. The pain was excruciating, so intense he had to bite down on the inside of his cheek to keep from crying out. But the pain meant life, meant blood flowing again, nerves waking up, tissue surviving. Dead flesh didn't hurt. Mother of 3 bears produced a small leather pouch and extracted what looked like dried herbs. She crushed them between her palms, releasing a sharp medicinal scent, then added snow to make a paste. With Sky Dancer's help, she carefully exposed Marcus's hands and feet, the extremities at greatest risk, and began applying the paste to his fingers and toes. The relief was almost immediate. Not complete. The pain still burned, but the herb mixture seemed to ease the worst of it, bringing a cooling sensation that countered the fire in his tissues. Yarrow and sage, Sky Dancer explained. Help with pain of cold damage. Her blood moved better. She watched her grandmother's Was that the relationship? Marcus thought it might be. Careful ministrations with obvious pride. Mother of 3 bears knows many plants, many medicines. She learned from her mother, who learned from her mother, going back to the time before memory. That's what struck Marcus most forcefully. This wasn't just survival knowledge, it was legacy. Each generation teaching the next, preserving not just techniques, but understanding. The why behind the how. The respect for natural law that couldn't be learned from books because it lived in the doing. Red Willow spoke again, her tone questioning. Sky Dancer translated. She asks, "Where were you going? Why alone? Why in storm season?" Marcus managed more words this time. Delivery, supplies to Henderson Ranch. Other side of Mountain Pass. The 3 women exchanged glances. Mother of 3 bears said something that made Red Willow shake her head firmly, and Sky Dancer's eyes go wide. Henderson Ranch is 5 days walking from here, Sky Dancer said slowly. In good weather. But now, she gestured at the shelter walls, beyond which the storm still raged. Now the pass is closed. Deep snow, ice. No horse can cross. No man either. 5 days. Marcus had thought he was perhaps 1 long day from Henderson's place. He'd been lost, wandering in circles probably, while hypothermia clouded his judgment and stole his sense of direction. If these women hadn't found him, he shuddered, and not from the cold. Mother of 3 bears spoke again, longer this time, her hands moving in those expressive gestures. Sky Dancer listened carefully before translating. She says, "White men always in hurry. Always pushing against the land, against the season, against the wisdom of waiting. Her people learned long ago, you cannot fight winter and win. You can only accommodate, find balance, know when to move and when to shelter." It wasn't said as criticism, Marcus realized, just observation, statement of fact. The old woman had watched his people spread across this territory for decades now, had seen the patterns of their mistakes, their stubborn insistence on imposing their will on a landscape that answered only to its own ancient laws. The elk know, Sky Dancer continued. The bear knows. The wolf knows. They listen to what the earth tells them. They move with the seasons, not against them. She met his eyes. Your people have forgotten how to listen, or never learned, Marcus thought. His people came from across the ocean, from different lands with different rules. They'd brought their knowledge with them. Valuable knowledge, certainly, but it was knowledge of a different world. And in their confidence, in their assumption that what worked there would work here, they'd lost the humility to learn from those who'd walked this land for thousands of years. Red Willow was checking the warming stones, rewrapping them in cloth, tucking them back around Marcus. The heat was glorious, seeping into his muscles, easing the terrible tension that came from prolonged shivering. Outside, the wind shrieked, throwing snow against the shelter walls. But inside, wrapped in furs and warmth and the practical care of these 3 women, Marcus felt something he hadn't expected. Peace. He'd spent so much of his life alone by choice, keeping people at arm's length, trusting no one but himself. And now here he was, stripped naked and vulnerable, his life held in the hands of strangers. Women he'd been taught to fear, people his culture viewed with suspicion and often hatred. Yet he felt safe, safer than he'd felt in years, maybe ever. Mother of 3 bears met his gaze and smiled. A small, knowing smile that suggested she understood exactly what he was thinking. She said something soft, almost musical. Sky Dancer's translation was simple. She says, "Welcome, welcome to the winter teaching. Welcome to the lesson of letting go." Marcus closed his eyes, surrendering to the warmth and the exhaustion and the strange, unexpected grace of this moment. These women had stripped away more than his frozen clothes. They'd stripped away his illusions, his assumptions, his pride, and in doing so, they'd given him back his life. Time moved differently in the shelter, slowly like honey in winter. The storm continued outside, but Marcus had lost track of whether it was day or night. In the perpetual dimness, lit only by the faint glow that filtered through the packed snow walls, the world had shrunk to this small space, these three women, and the gradual return of warmth to his battered body. Mother of three bears seemed to sense when he was alert enough to truly listen. She began to speak. Long, flowing sentences in her own language, her hands weaving patterns in the air. Sky Dancer translated, though Marcus suspected she was condensing the elders' words, unable to capture all their nuance in her limited English. She tells the story of the first winter, Sky Dancer began. Long ago, when the world was young, the people did not know how to survive the cold season. They had fire, yes, but not understanding. Many died each winter. The old ones, the young ones, taken by the cold. Red Willow listened intently, though she must have heard this story 100 times. There was something ritualistic about it, Marcus realized. This wasn't just storytelling. It was transmission, the passing down of knowledge wrapped in narrative, made memorable through repetition and ceremony. Then came a winter. Sky Dancer continued, worse than any before. The snow fell for 40 days and 40 nights. The people huddled in their shelters, burning all their wood, using all their supplies. They were desperate. Many spoke of walking into the snow, choosing quick death over slow starvation. Mother of three bears' voice dropped lower, more somber. Sky Dancer's translation matched her tone, but there was a woman, a grandmother like Mother of three bears. She had watched the animals, the bears who slept through winter, the rabbits who tunneled beneath the snow, the elk who found shelter in the deep forests. She had paid attention where others had not, and she understood. The land was not trying to kill them. The land was teaching them. Marcus found himself drawn into the story, despite his exhaustion. This was how knowledge survived, he realized. Not in written texts that could burn or fade, but in memory. In stories told and retold until they became part of the people's very identity. The grandmother showed the people how to build shelters from snow itself, Sky Dancer translated. How to use the cold against the cold. How to layer furs to trap warmth. How to read the signs that animals gave. Where they sheltered, what they ate. How they moved through winter. She taught them that wet clothing was death. That the body's own heat was precious and must be guarded. She showed them which plants could help with cold sickness, which stones held heat longest, how to survive on less food by resting, like the bears do. Red Willow spoke up suddenly, addressing Marcus directly. Her English was more broken than Sky Dancer's, but passionate. Your people think we are simple, primitive, because we have no, she struggled for the word, no writing. No books, but we have this. She tapped her temple firmly. We have memory. We have stories that teach. We have wisdom of hundreds and hundreds of winters, thousands. Your books. She made a dismissive gesture. Books can lie. Books can be lost. But knowledge that lives in people, that is tested every winter, that is passed from grandmother to mother to daughter. That knowledge is true. Mother of three bears nodded approvingly at Red Willow's speech. She added something, and Sky Dancer translated with obvious pride. She says, you are proof. You had books, yes? You had learning from your people, yes? But the books did not tell you that wet clothes steal heat. Your learning did not tell you to remove them. You would have died believing you were doing the right thing, believing the death clothes were protecting you. The truth of it hit Marcus like a physical blow. She was absolutely right. He'd been killing himself with his own ignorance, secure in his false knowledge, confident in his experience. Without these women's intervention, he'd have frozen to death wrapped in his own mistaken certainty. How many of your people die like this? Sky Dancer asked softly. Die because they do not listen, do not learn from those who know. Too many, Marcus thought. Far too many. He'd known cowboys who'd frozen to death. Settlers who'd starved through winters, prospectors who'd ventured into the mountains and never returned. His people blamed the land, called it savage, unforgiving, hostile. But maybe the land wasn't hostile. Maybe it just answered to different rules than the ones they'd brought from their old world. And maybe the tragedy wasn't the land's hardness, but his people's stubbornness. Mother of Three Bears spoke again, and her tone shifted, became questioning, almost challenging. She asks, Sky Dancer translated, "What will you do? When you return to your people, will you tell them what you learned? Will you say that Apache women saved you with knowledge your people call primitive?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Marcus understood what she was really asking. Would he have the courage to credit these women? To acknowledge that they knew something he didn't? Or would shame and prejudice make him hide the truth? Maybe claim he'd survived on his own, or stumbled upon the shelter by lucky accident? "I will tell them," he said, his voice stronger now. "I will tell them the truth." Red Willow's expression suggested skepticism. She'd heard promises from white men before, Marcus suspected. Promises that evaporated like morning frost when those men returned to their own people. But Mother of Three Bears studied him with those deep, knowing eyes. After a long moment, she nodded slowly. She said something that made Sky Dancer smile. She says, "We will see. Words are easy, actions are truth. But she hopes you will remember, hopes you will carry the winter teaching with you." The conversation lulled, and Marcus found himself drifting, not quite asleep, but not fully awake either. The warmth, the exhaustion, the sheer relief of being alive, it all pulled at him like a gentle current. In his half-dreaming state, he heard the women talking quietly among themselves. Their language was musical, full of sounds his own tongue couldn't reproduce. Occasionally one would check his wrappings or adjust the warming stones. Their care was constant, vigilant. He thought about the assumption he'd carried, that he'd known about survival, about this land. 15 years here, and he'd understood so little. He'd looked at the surface, learned the obvious lessons, but never gone deeper. Never asked what the land itself might teach if he stopped trying to conquer it long enough to listen. These women had that depth, had that connection. They didn't see themselves as separate from the wilderness, fighting against it. They were part of it, another element in the great web of life and season and cycle. Sky Dancer's voice roused him from his thoughts. "The storm is quieting. Red Willow went outside to look. She says, maybe by morning we can travel." Morning. The word seemed strange, disconnected from any meaningful reality. How long had he been in this shelter? A day, 2 days. It felt both like minutes and like years. "Where will you go?" he asked. Sky Dancer consulted with Mother of Three Bears before answering. "We follow the elk still. They lead us to Winter Camp, place where our people gather. Deep Valley, protected from worse storms. We go there now." "And me?" Marcus's voice was small, vulnerable. Mother of Three Bears spoke, her tone matter-of-fact. Sky Dancer translated, "You come with us to the edge of our winter grounds. From there, maybe 2 days' walk to settlement. Place called Silver Creek. You know it?" Marcus did know it. A rough mining town, the last outpost before the high country. If he could reach Silver Creek, he could get new supplies, maybe find work until spring. Henderson's ranch would have to wait. "I have no way to repay you," he said, the words sticking in his throat. "You saved my life. That's a debt I can't." Mother of Three Bears cut him off with a gesture. She spoke firmly, and Sky Dancer's translation was equally firm. She says, "There is no debt. Life is not transaction, not trade. You were dying. We had knowledge to help. That is enough. That is what people do." Such simple wisdom, such profound generosity. Marcus felt something burning behind his eyes that had nothing to do with cold damage. Red Willow returned, ducking through the low entrance with a burst of frigid air. She spoke rapidly, gesturing outside. Sky Dancer's translation was excited. "Storm breaks! Sky clearing! We can leave when light comes." The long night in the shelter was ending. Soon Marcus would return to his world, and these women to theirs. But something had shifted in him during those hours, wrapped in furs and wisdom. Something he couldn't quite name, but knew he'd carry with him. The winter teaching, Mother of Three Bears had called it. The lesson of letting go, of trusting, of understanding that strength sometimes meant acknowledging your own weakness and accepting help from unexpected places. from unexpected people. As the women began preparing for travel, checking supplies and testing the weather, Marcus closed his eyes one last time in the shelter that had saved his life. He tried to memorize this feeling, this moment, this truth. He'd come into the storm alone, arrogant in his experience, certain of his knowledge. He would leave it changed, humbled, aware of how much he didn't know, how much he'd never even thought to ask. The storm had stripped him bare, but these women had clothed him in something more valuable than any fur or fabric, the understanding that survival wasn't about conquest, but about connection. Dawn broke clear and cold, so cold that the air itself seemed to crystallize, hanging suspended like glass. Marcus emerged from the shelter into a transformed world. The storm had buried everything under fresh snow, smoothing the landscape into gentle curves and softened edges. The sky was pale blue, almost white at the horizon, and the sun, low and distant, cast long purple shadows across the pristine surface. Beautiful, deadly, both at once. Red Willow had already broken camp with brutal efficiency. The travois was loaded, tracks were covered, signs of their presence erased. She moved through the work with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 times, survived 1,000 times. Mother of 3 bears handed Marcus his clothes. They'd been dried somehow during the night, laid near the warming stones. The frozen moisture evaporated away. The fabric was stiff and cold, but wearable now. Not the death trap they'd been when soaked through. Dressing was an ordeal. His fingers still didn't work properly, clumsy and swollen. His feet felt like blocks of wood inside his boots. But Sky Dancer helped him with the laces, patient and unhurried. While Mother of 3 bears watched with those assessing eyes, checking for signs of remaining cold damage, they gave him food, pemmican hard and dense and rich with fat. It tasted like life. Marcus ate slowly, carefully, feeling strength seep back into his limbs with each bite. The women ate too, efficiently, wasting no motion or time. Then they walked. Red Willow led, breaking trail through the deep snow with the travois. Mother of 3 bears walked second, her movement still strong despite her age. Sky Dancer stayed near Marcus, watching him, ready to help if he faltered. And Marcus struggled. Each step was an effort. His legs felt weak, his lungs burned in the frigid air, and exhaustion clung to him like a second skin. But he forced himself forward step after step, because these women had given him back his life, and the least he could do was not slow them down. They walked through a landscape of silence. The snow muffled everything, absorbing sound until the world felt wrapped in cotton. Only the crunch of their footsteps, the rasp of breathing, the occasional call of a distant crow broke the quiet. Marcus found himself watching the women as they traveled, the way they moved, reading the terrain, choosing paths, communicating with gestures and glances that needed no words. They walked in winter the way birds flew, naturally, instinctively, part of the element rather than fighting against it. By midday, they'd covered ground Marcus wouldn't have thought possible. His own pace would have been half as fast, twice as exhausting. These women knew how to move through snow without wasting energy, where to step to avoid hidden dangers, when to rest before exhaustion became dangerous. They stopped in a stand of pine trees, sheltered from the wind. Red Willow produced more pemmican, and they shared water from a leather flask. Marcus marveled that it hadn't frozen solid, then noticed the flask was tucked inside Red Willow's clothing, kept warm by her body heat. Everything they did had purpose, had reason. How much further? Udhi asked Sky Dancer. She pointed to a line of hills in the distance. Beyond those, our winter valley. You go different direction. Toward the sun falling. She meant west. Maybe you walk half a day more, then you find trail. Follow down to Silver Creek, half a day. Marcus could manage that. He would manage that. Mother of 3 bears spoke, her tone growing serious. Sky Dancer translated slowly, carefully. She says, when you reach your people, they will ask questions. They will want to know where you were. Ibashu helped you. Some of your people, She hesitated. Some do not like that we still walk these lands. They think we should be gone, on the reservations. Not free, Marcus nodded slowly. He knew the tensions, the conflicts, the bitter history written in blood and broken treaties. Some settlers wanted all native peoples removed, confined, erased. Some were actively hostile, seeing every Apache as a threat. She says, Skydancer continued, you must choose. Tell truth or tell something else. Both choices have consequences, but she thinks you should know this before you return. It was a warning, Marcus realized. A kindness, even. They were giving him an out, a way to avoid any social cost of acknowledging their help. They expected nothing from him, demanded nothing, but they wanted him to make his choice with open eyes. I told you before, Marcus said, meeting Mother of Three Bears' gaze. I'll tell the truth. I don't care what anyone thinks about it. Red Willow spoke sharply. Skydancer's translation was blunt. She says you should care. Truth can be dangerous. Your people have killed for less. The words hung in the cold air like an accusation, because they were true. Marcus had heard the stories, had seen the aftermath. Settlers who sympathized too openly with native peoples sometimes found themselves outcast, threatened, even attacked. But something had broken in Marcus during his time in that shelter. Some old part of himself that cared about fitting in, about belonging, about being accepted by people whose acceptance suddenly seemed worthless. Then they can try, he said quietly. But I won't lie about who saved my life. I won't erase you because acknowledging you is inconvenient. Mother of Three Bears studied him for a long moment. Then she reached out and placed one scarred, strong hand against his chest, over his heart. She spoke a single sentence. Skydancer's voice was soft. She says, you have learned the winter teaching, not just surviving the cold, but letting the cold teach you who you really are. They walked on. The sun climbed toward its peak, low and weak this time of year, but bright enough to make the snow glitter like scattered diamonds. Marcus's shadow stretched long beside him, dark against the white. As they crested a rise, Marcus saw smoke in the distance, thin ribbons rising from the valley the women had mentioned. Their winter camp, their people, safety and community, and the continuation of a way of life that had survived countless winters before this one. This was where they would part. Red Willow stopped and pointed to a different direction, where a line of trees marked what might be a frozen creek. Oh, that way, she said in her broken English. Follow the water. It takes you out to the flatlands, to your Silver Creek. Marcus turned to face all three women. He wanted to say something profound, something worthy of what they'd given him, but all the words seemed inadequate. Thank you, he managed. For my life, for the teaching, for everything. Skydancer didn't translate. Apparently some things needed no translation. Mother of Three Bears stepped forward. From inside her clothing, she produced something, a small bundle wrapped in soft leather. She pressed it into Marcus's hands. Skydancer explained, medicine herbs, for cold damage and food, enough for 2-3 days. You take it. I can't, Marcus started. You will, Red Willow interrupted firmly. Because we have more, and you have nothing. Is simple, simple. There was that word again. These women reduced everything to its essential truth, stripped away all the complicated justifications and social games that Marcus's people wrapped around every interaction. Mother of Three Bears spoke one last time, her hands moving in those expressive gestures. Skydancer translated, and her voice carried unusual emotion. She says, walk carefully, watch the sky, listen to what the land tells you. And remember, winter always teaches. You only have to be willing to learn. She paused. And she says, maybe we meet again, maybe not, but you will carry us with you. And we will remember the man who let himself be saved. Then they turned, all three of them synchronized like birds wheeling, and began walking toward their valley. Red Willow pulled the travois. Mother of Three Bears walked with her steady, unhurried pace. Skydancer glanced back once, raised a hand in farewell, then followed. Marcus stood alone on the snowy ridge and watched them go until they were just dark shapes against the white, then just shadows, then gone, swallowed by the landscape as if they'd never been there at all, except he had the medicine bundle in his hands, had the pemmican in his pocket, had the memory of their care burned into his consciousness, had the truth of what they'd taught him. He turned toward the tree line Red Willow had indicated and began walking. His legs were stronger now, his body recovering. The cold was still brutal, but he understood it better, respected it better. He moved with it instead of fighting it, conserving energy, choosing his path carefully. The winter teaching. As he walked, Marcus thought about what waited for him in Silver Creek. Questions, certainly. Suspicion, probably. And a choice, not just whether to tell the truth, but how to live it. Because acknowledging these women had saved him was just words. Honoring what they'd taught him. That would take a lifetime. The sun slid lower in the sky. Marcus's shadow lengthened, and with each step through the snow, he felt the weight of his old life, his old certainties, falling away like shed skin. He was walking out of the wilderness, but the wilderness and the women who knew its secrets would walk with him from now on, forever. Silver Creek appeared in the valley below like a wound in the snow. Dark buildings, smoke rising from chimneys, the raw geometry of human defiance against the winter landscape. Marcus stood on the ridge overlooking the settlement and felt reluctance. Strange, how returning to his own people could feel more dangerous than facing the storm had been. But he knew what was coming, knew the questions he'd face, knew the test that waited. He'd been walking for 6 hours since leaving the 3 women. The medicine bundle, mother of 3 bears, had given him pressed against his ribs, hidden inside his shirt. The pemmican had sustained him, and the knowledge had kept him moving even when exhaustion threatened to drag him down. He descended into the town as the sun touched the western horizon, painting the snow orange and pink and gold. The first person who spotted him was Jimmy Carlson, standing outside the mining company office. His eyes went wide. Sweet Jesus, Marcus. Marcus Cole. Jimmy's shout brought others running. We thought you were dead, man. Henderson sent riders out looking for you 3 days ago when you didn't show. Where the hell have you been? 3 days. The storm had raged for 3 days, while he'd lain in that snow shelter, hovering between life and death. Time had meant nothing in that white void. Within minutes, Marcus was surrounded. Questions flew at him like arrows. Where was his horse? His supplies? How had he survived? What had happened? Tom Henderson himself appeared, pushing through the crowd. The old rancher looked haggard, guilty. Marcus, God Almighty, son, I never should have asked you to make that run. Not with weather turning like it did. We all thought, that I'd frozen to death, Marcus finished. His voice sounded strange in his own ears, calmer than it had been before, steadier, almost did. They took him to the boarding house, sat him by the fire, pressed hot coffee into his hands. Mrs. Chen, who ran the place, clucked over him like a worried hen, bringing blankets and soup. The warmth of the fire felt almost aggressive after days of carefully rationed heat, and they wanted his story. They all wanted his story. Marcus sipped the coffee, too hot, burning his tongue, and felt their expectation pressing on him. This was the moment. The choice, truth or comfort. He thought about Red Willow's warning, about the danger truth could bring, about how easy it would be to say he'd found a cave, built a fire, survived on his own grit and determination. That's what they wanted to hear. A story of rugged individualism, of white man's resilience. But he looked around at these faces, men he'd known for years, worked alongside, shared drinks with, and suddenly saw them clearly, saw their limitations, their assumptions, the narrowness of their understanding. They'd never saved anyone by stripping them naked in a blizzard, never built a shelter from snow, never walked in winter the way Mother of 3 Bears walked, with respect and understanding rather than brute force. Resistance, and they'd never questioned whether their way was the only way. 3 Apache women found me, Marcus said quietly. The room went silent. You could have heard a snowflake land. Jimmy Carlson recovered first. Apache women. Marcus, you took a hard knock to the head or something. No knock, Marcus said firmly. I was dying, hypothermia. My horse collapsed, my pack animal ran. The cold it was in me, shutting me down. He met their eyes one by one. These women tracked me through the storm, found me when I couldn't even stand anymore. Henderson frowned. And they helped you, just like that? They saved my life. Marcus pulled out the medicine bundle, held it up. They took off my wet clothes, all of them, wrapped me in dry furs, built a shelter from snow, used their own knowledge of surviving winter to bring me back from the edge. Took off your clothes? This from Bill Masterson, his voice heavy with insinuation. In a shelter. Marcus, what kind of... They saved my life, Marcus interrupted, his voice sharp as breaking ice. I was dying because I didn't know what they knew. Because my wet clothes were stealing heat faster than my body could make it. Because I was ignorant of how to truly survive in this land. The word hung in the air, ignorant. It wasn't a word men like this applied to themselves, ever. Mrs. Chen spoke up, her accent thick but her tone thoughtful. In my country, old people say, pride keeps you warm until it kills you. Maybe these women knew something you didn't, Marcus. They knew everything I didn't, Marcus said. Generations of knowledge passed down, tested every winter. They understood this land in ways in ways we never... He gestured around the room. We come here and we fight everything. Fight the weather, fight the terrain, fight the people who were here first. And we call it civilization. Bill Masterson stood abruptly. You saying we should learn from savages? From Indians who don't even have proper houses, or I'm saying they saved my life when I couldn't save myself, Marcus cut him off. I'm saying they had wisdom I lacked. I'm saying that word, savage, it doesn't mean what you think it means. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Some faces showed anger, others confusion. Mrs. Chen looked thoughtful. Henderson just looked tired. Where are these women now? Henderson asked quietly. Gone to their winter camp. Somewhere in the high valleys. They walked me part way here, gave me supplies, sent me on. Marcus paused. And they asked for nothing in return? No payment, no gratitude. They just helped, because I needed help and they had knowledge to give. Mighty convenient story, Bill muttered. No witnesses, no proof. Just your word. Marcus stood, wincing as his still damaged feet protested. He pulled the medicine bundle from his shirt, unwrapped the pemmican. This is their food. Their medicine, made by their hands. He met Bill's hostile gaze. But you're right. You have only my word, and I guess that shows what my word is worth to some of you. He headed for the door. Henderson called after him, Marcus, wait. Where are you going? To find a bed to rest. And then... Marcus paused at the threshold, cold air rushing in from outside. Then I need to figure out what kind of man I want to be. The kind who tells comfortable lies, or the kind who speaks truth even when it costs him. He walked out into the winter night. Behind him, voices erupted, arguing, questioning, doubting. Let them argue. Let them doubt. Marcus had learned something in that snow shelter that these men might never understand. Strength wasn't about never needing help. It was about accepting help when it came, and honoring those who gave it. The next morning, Marcus found himself sitting in Mrs. Chen's kitchen, drinking tea, while she prepared breakfast for her boarders. She worked in comfortable silence until finally saying, My husband's people. They came from mountains, high mountains, very cold. They had ways of surviving winter too, different from here, but same wisdom. Listen to land, learn from those who know. She poured more tea. Young men always think they know everything. Some learn, some die. She studied him. You learned is good. Word had spread through Silver Creek overnight. By noon, Marcus had received 3 job offers. Ranchers needing winter help, a mining company looking for supply runners come spring. But he'd also received looks, suspicious glances, whispered conversations that stopped when he walked past. Bill Masterson and 2 of his friends cornered him outside the general store. We've been thinking about your story. Cole, Bill said, his voice deceptively friendly. And we're wondering, how do we know you didn't make some kind of arrangement with those Indians? How do we know you're not giving them information about our settlements, our movements? Marcus felt anger flash through him, hot and sharp. But he remembered Mother of Three Bears' calm wisdom, Red Willow's fierce practicality, Sky Dancer's gentle patience. He took a breath. I'm going to say this once, Bill. Those women saved my life out of basic human decency, something you might want to try sometime. He stepped closer. And if you have a problem with me acknowledging that debt, with me telling the truth about who helped me, then that's your problem, not mine. Could be your problem, though, one of Bill's friends said. If folks around here decide they can't trust you, then they can't trust me, Marcus shrugged. I'd rather be honest and alone than accepted for lies. He walked away, heart pounding, half expecting them to follow. But they didn't. Bullies rarely did when you refused to be intimidated. That evening, Henderson found him. The old rancher sat down heavily on the boarding house porch. Joints creaking. You're causing quite a stir. Marcus, didn't mean to. I believe you. Henderson pulled out a pipe, packed it thoughtfully. I've been in this territory 30 years. Seen a lot of things. Done some things I'm not proud of. He lit the pipe, drew on it. Relations between settlers and Indians. They're complicated. Lot of blood on both sides. Lot of pain. I know that, Marcus said. But here's what I also know. Henderson met his eyes. Those Apache women didn't have to help you. They chose to. And you telling the truth about it. That takes courage. More courage than most men have. He stood, grunting with the effort. Job's still yours come spring, if you want it. And Marcus, don't let small-minded fools like Bill Masterson make you regret doing the right thing. After Henderson left, Marcus sat in the cold evening air and watched the sun set over the mountains. Somewhere up there, in a protected valley he'd never see, 3 women were living their lives, teaching the next generation, surviving another winter with grace and knowledge and strength. They'd given him more than his life back. They'd given him a truth he'd been missing. That wisdom wasn't owned by any one people, that survival wasn't about domination, that the greatest courage wasn't facing danger, but facing your own ignorance and choosing to learn. The winter wind whispered through Silver Creek, carrying snow and secrets. Marcus pulled his coat tighter, the coat that had nearly killed him, that now he knew how to wear properly, how to dry, how to respect. Everything was different now. The cold felt different. The land felt different. He felt different. The winter teaching had taken root in him, deep in the soil of his soul. And though spring would eventually come, though the snow would melt and the world would warm, that teaching would remain forever. Because some lessons, the ones that save your life by stripping away everything you thought you knew, those lessons don't fade. They become part of who you are. Marcus Cole had walked into a storm alone, arrogant and certain. He'd emerged changed, humbled, grateful, and awake. The 3 women who'd saved him had given him back his life. But more than that, they'd given him back his humanity, and as the stars emerged in the clear winter sky, cold and bright and eternal, Marcus made a silent promise to the women he'd never see again. He would remember. He would honor. He would learn, not just from that one winter lesson, but from every season of his life to come, because survival wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. And that was the winter that stripped him bare and gave him back his soul. If this story moved you, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. I'd love to see how far these tales travel across the world. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next story of grit, survival, and the quiet power of the human spirit. Now go on, check out these other cool stories waiting for you right here.